see. I think that's got us. Yeah, all right. We are live on here. Let me take it back to our meeting screen. Got it. Perfect. Okay. Hey there, gang. Patrick King here. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in for what is now episode number 55 of Talking About Horses. If you're part of, I want to thank you for tuning in for this. These podcasts have been kind of on hold for a little while, and we've had lots of folks messaging over the length of time here, asking for me to get back into these, and are we still doing them, that sort of thing. And I've told everybody, yes, we're still doing them. We're just crazy busy right now. So thank you all for your patience. Thank you for your encouragement, and thank you for listening today. And today I am really pleased to be joined by my friend Carl Bledsoe. From his farm in Talking Rock, Georgia, Carl Bledsoe has 40 years of experience and brings with him a wealth of knowledge to the gaited horse breeds. He's a second-generation trainer of champion and world champion Tennessee walking horses, but he chose to walk away from the show ring to develop his own style of horsemanship. And you can bet we're going to talk about that tonight. Carl believes in education and understanding by having compassion and empathy for the horse, not training horses, but rather building relationships. And he approaches each horse as an individual and asks himself, what's in this for the horse? Rather than shortcuts or gimmicks, he believes in classical training with a true understanding of the biomechanics of the horse, as well as the rider, and how it relates to proper self-carriage. And without proper self-carriage, you not only not have the balanced horse physically or mentally, you will also not achieve correct gait. I met Carl and his wife Tammy at the Eastern States Expo in Murfreesboro, Southern States Equine Expo in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, just this year, and also had the chance to judge alongside him at the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off in Winfield, West Virginia. And Carl, thank you so much for agreeing to come on here and chat with me on Talking About Horses.
Well, I'm really glad to be here today, Patrick.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And did I hear, is Tammy in the background there?
Yeah, she's my note taker. She always stays kind of behind the scenes.
There we go. Perfect. Good. She's there with the prod, making sure you say all the right things, right?
Well, yeah, in a manner of speaking, yes.
If you're watching this video live or even in the replay and you see Carl jump after he says something, she's probably kicked him under the table.
That's right.
Oh no, that's perfect. Well, I'm so glad to have both of you with us tonight. And so for the folks that, well, I've got a few questions for the folks that first, for the people that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit more than kind of the brief bio that I read there. Who's Carl Bledsoe? Give us your story.
You know, Patrick, I grew up in a family that trained performance type padded big lick Tennessee walking horses. Okay. That's the world that I grew up in from my childhood, birth, until I was 40 years old.
Okay.
So, you know, that there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that I could say about that world, but dysfunctional's the one that comes to mind the most.
Dysfunctional. So actually, and I hate to interrupt on here, but for the folks that are listening that maybe don't have much experience with gaited horses, what does it mean to be a padded big lick horse?
They wear an extension on their foot. It's a shoe. Well, actually, it's a shoe on the bottom or a rubber surface on the bottom, but they have these pads and wedges that they stack. The wedges can be a ½ inch in the heel down to nothing in the toe, and then the flat pads are a ½ inch or 3/8 thick. But the way that they put those shoes on the horse is dictated by the length of the horse's toe. So you can only have half as much extension on the horse's foot as what the natural toe measures. So on a horse that has a 4-inch natural toe, you can have 2 inches of thickness of the attachment in the toe, not counting the shoe. And then to meet federal regulation, they have a heel-toe ratio. You measure down the pressure-bearing point of the leg and from the toe, and the toe has to stay an inch longer than the heel to stay within the federal regulation on the measurement.
So when we talk about federal regulation, what's I feel like I have several questions swimming in my head right now. Number one is, what's the function of adding that much onto the horse's foot? What is that? I'm assuming that's for some sort of mechanical deviation.
Well, it is a mechanical deviation, and what it does is it manipulates the horse's center of gravity. And in my estimation, I can tell you this now because I've been 10 years into this road on classical horsemanship. What it does is produce false collection. It forces the horse a little more on his hindquarters.
Okay.
And then the angle of the shoe and the weight of the shoe make the horse kind of crouch behind a little. And then they use an action device, which is actually a chain. They're limited to 6 ounces. And the chain, they say, is to make the horse giving the sensation of stepping out of the chain, i.e. animation.
Okay. And that's around the fetlock, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we're adding weight, we're adding thickness.
Yes.
To this is where I find the confusion maybe for myself, but we're adding weight and thickness to the front end in order to draw weight back to the hind end.
Yeah. What the story that they give is the angle and weight of the shoe enable the horse to crouch on his back end so he can be lighter on the front end. To me, that's not necessarily understanding the biomechanics of a horse. That goes completely against the biomechanics of the horse. Really and truthfully, the reason they have to use the shoe in the chain is most gaited horses, when they start being ridden with the burden of the saddle and the rider, they learn to pace because that's easier for them to carry the weight.
Mm-hmm.
A pace is not as easy to animate as a trot is because it's not balanced.
Sure. Right.
It's not balanced because they have lateral pairs versus diagonal pairs.
Yes.
So
now a pace is also kind of an energy saving gait, isn't it? I know I've seen it quite a bit in, I used to own a couple Siberian Huskies, and they will often pace. And you see that when you watch sled dogs pulling, that they pull at a pace a lot of times.
Right.
And so that's energy saving then. And so that's where you're saying it's not as easy to animate.
Well, the pace is not easy to animate at all because it's a forward move rather than a upward move. But there's a lot of other things, Patrick, that go along with the shoe and the chain to aid in the animation and the crouching of the back end. I'm sure anybody that's watched the internet has seen the horrific videos of the horses that look like they're struggling. And they talk about sore horses. So through the years, the people developed a way of putting different emollients, aggressive emollients, kerosene, diesel fuel, lighter fluid. They would actually put that on the horse's feet. And when you put the chain on that, you can get a reaction from the chain.
Because it's irritating it, and so you're getting a chemical reaction, like a chemical burn.
It is very irritating. Actually, there's other chemicals that a lot of times they will put in that stuff, mustard oil, crotonol, several different things. And that group has gotten really skilled and better at doing that and disguising it to get through the inspection process. But to develop that animated lick, you don't just put the shoe and the chain on the horse and him run out there today and say, look at me, I'm a big lick fancy show horse. There's a progression of training that goes on. And early on in that horse's life, they'll stack chains. They'll have 10 pair of 6-ounce chains around his fetlock. And
because what you're saying is the single, I think you said it was 6 ounces, is acceptable in the show ring.
Exactly.
Wow. So many questions about that, but some are hard to formulate. Now, I'm just going to go back to at one point in my career, I did a little bit of competing with Morgan horses, and I remember seeing I believe maybe they were hackneys or something like that, but there was to induce action of the front legs, they had surgical tubing tied around their fetlocks. Is that just something completely different, or?
It is completely different. It's used in the trotting world because those horses are lighter on their feet and easier to animate. If you put the surgical tubing on the pacing horse, it encourages the pace and they don't collect up to the walk or the natural 4-beat gait that they say they're developing through breeding the horse. Now, those babies walking by their mother will exhibit that 4-beat walk at speed, but when they get up old enough to ride and they start being ridden, they learn how to pace. To your point a while ago, because it's easier for them to pace and carry the burden of the load. It's much easier for them for that to be their locomotion, but that is not correct as far as the standard for 99% of the gaited breeds. 99% of the gaited breeds do the same walk, 4-beat, 4 equal strides walk that your horses do at a walk, but then we do it at speed.
I see. Okay, so it's a change of tempo, not a change of.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, when you get to the signature gait later on in life, there's a little differentiation between some of the breeds, like your walking and your racking horse, and that has to do with overstride. If you train a Tennessee walking horse, you're wanting to develop as the horse goes through learning how to do some collection. You want to lengthen the stride. You want more overstride.
Okay.
On a
Does
racking
that
horse,
become the running walk? Is that
exactly?
so? That when you're referring to the signature gait, that would be
Yes,
for the Tennessee
that would be
walk.
the running walk for the racking horses. It would be the fast rack. For the mountain horses, it would be the show gait or the saddle rack. It all is a lateral 4 up through the progression, but as you get to the signature gait, some of the horses shorten the stride, some of the horses lengthen the stride in their hindquarters.
Gotcha. Okay, so their signature it's still a 4-beat gait. It's just a deviation of stride length.
Exactly, and speed. So
Right.
like a Missouri Foxtrotter, they do a flat walk just exactly like a Tennessee walking horse does at the intermediate speed. But then when they go faster, they do a foxtrot. And what a foxtrot is it's more or less an advanced displacement on a diagonal moving horse.
Okay, explain that to me, because I learned to foxtrot once at an Arthur Murray dance studio, and I wasn't very good. I got stuck in a different kind of placement in that class, and it was not advanced.
So my wife is rolling in the floor. So with the Tennessee walking horse, when you have a horse that's balanced at the flat foot walk, if he were to stride forward with his left rear foot first, the left front foot would follow, would be next in the progression. Then the right rear foot would be next in the progression, and then the right front foot, and it would repeat the same cycle over and over.
Okay.
Missouri Foxtrotter does that at a foxtrot, but when they go to the signature gait, it's a diagonal pairing. They do the same. They have a diagonal pairing and a lateral pairing, meaning left rear, left front, right rear, right front. But when they speed it up, the left front, the front foot will hit the ground a split second before the corresponding diagonal rear foot. It doesn't do that with a flat walk. The back foot hits before the diagonal corresponding front foot.
Okay. Whoo!
Complicated, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And now, if I'm understanding it correctly, one of the big reasons that I've heard from students that ride gaited horses in my clinics, because I don't have many gaited horse students that compete in kind of any of the sort of things that we're talking about here, but it's an easier gait to ride. Is that correct? They would say, comparatively speaking, an easier gait on the rider's body than a trotting horse.
It is much easier done correctly, but if they hard pace, The hard
Okay.
pace is harder to sit than the trot.
Yeah. Now
Because-
that I do have experience with, and I felt like I was riding on a penguin waddling around the
and
arena.
you can't, and there's no way to post and be in time with the feet that way. It's extremely impossible. I mean, you could do it, but it's extremely impossible to find the rhythm to stay in motion on the pace.
Gotcha.
So it's rough, but a horse that does it correctly, the four independent steps that are the same distance, they're extremely smooth to ride. But here's the tricky part. You can have a horse that's doing what we call not a hard pace, but a stepping pace, where there's just a split second of footfall timing between the rear and front foot, and the horse be hollow backed. He can be smooth to sit on and ride, but very incorrect in gait. And that's where most of the dressage people that I've come in contact with, that's where the gray area is with them.
Okay.
It can be very smooth, but you've got to be able to watch those feet and make sure that each stride length, front to back, each foot's covering the same amount of real estate, same amount of ground.
Gotcha. And in saying that, so when they're dropping their back, if I'm thinking about just anatomy in general and the biomechanics, if they're dropping their back, the pelvis is kind of left out behind them. So then the hind foot is not reaching as far forward as you want.
And it doesn't have the carrying power.
Sure.
Okay.
The bridge has lost its supports.
Exactly. So those horses are extremely hard for a lot of people to train. What happens over time in the world that I'm in, that horse is the hardest horse to train because he's been ridden through the national forest by trail riders for 6 months, hollow backed, and he's become sore. He's become sore in the stifles. He's become sore at the LS joint, a lot of times in the withers too. And it's really hard to rehabilitate that horse, especially, most people that bring a horse for training want to do it in a condensed time.
Sure.
So if they rode the horse in the national forest 3 times a week for 6 months, then it's going to take you that same amount of time, just about,
to change that, to rehabilitate.
Most people give me a 45 to a 90-day window to fix the problem. They want me to train the horse.
Right. And now we're talking if he's been ridden what we'd call inverted. Right?
Exactly. Okay. And the horses that come to me inverted that have been ridden in the arena, like the horses that have done some local dressage tests or local shows, they don't tend to be as sore, as long as the ones that do the trail riding. It's the trail riding, especially in North Georgia in the mountains, is very taxing on a horse that's ridden correctly.
And so just to clarify for the folks listening that might not be as used to this kind of terminology as what we are. So when we're talking about a horse being inverted, we're talking about the back is hollow, the back is down, versus a horse that's engaged where the back is being elevated by the proper movement or proper engagement, right, of the haunches. And then when we're not just saying trail riding in general is bad, right, or arena riding in general is better, we're talking about how the horse is actually physically using himself well.
Everything to do with that horse using himself correctly from back to front.
Gotcha. Yep. And so then when these horses are coming to you for training, what you're doing, I'm thinking based on the way that they're carrying and what we're talking about, there's going to be a lot of compensatory muscle patterns and movement patterns, and maybe we'd say kind of improper muscle development. So you're working on physical therapy as much as you're working on actually training, right?
Most of the time it is physical therapy, agility. A lot of times it's mental therapy, because most of the time those horses that become inverted over time, they're hard to maintain a tempo with. They're hard to rate a speed on. They become very chargy, especially the gaited horses do. So the people go to more equipment, more bit a lot of times. So then you've got the horse that's been overbitted, that's a little bit behind the vertical, that's learned how to lock his jaw. And you know what happens at the pole and all of that when a horse locks his jaw and stays against the bit. So
Right.
it's really, I mean, if you spent 2 months with some of the horses that come to me, you would say you didn't know how in the world I didn't need a psychiatrist to help me keep things straight sometimes.
Don't we all?
Well, I guess we do, really.
Right. Goodness. So yeah, and I'm thinking when we're talking about tempo and we're talking about the body, I know that one of the things that I tend to talk about a lot in clinics when I'm teaching is that tempo is an emotional condition of the gait. And I'm just generalizing, right? But when I say that, it's the horse that's tense in his mind is going to be tense in his body. And if he's out of balance, just like you or I, right? If we lose our balance, we fall down, right? If our horses lose their balance, they'll fall to the forehand more likely. And so those horses that are, as you say, rushy and chargy, those are horses that are kind of running to try to catch themselves, but they can't catch themselves because they're running.
Exactly. Right. And they're inverted, broken in two. They have no carrying power from the hindquarters because they're tracking way out behind themselves.
Okay. Yep.
And so you have to be able to do something to pique the horse's interest. First of all, he's got to be interested enough to want to work with you, because most of the time he just knows he's got a big bit on him. We're going through the woods wide open. Gotcha. So I have to start over from scratch. It doesn't matter anymore what anybody brings to me. If it's a younger horse that's just been ridden a few times, never been started, or a seasoned trail horse, I start at ground one. We do in-hand work right off until I make absolute sure that we don't have any kind of soreness, any kind of, anything out of place. About 70% of the time when somebody brings a horse to me to train, within the first week, I will call them and say, listen, my veterinarian needs to do a lameness exam on this horse to make sure that what my mind sees is what is truly affecting the horse. And a lot of times people balk and don't want to spend that money. But here's the deal. It's going to cost you that money either way. It's either going to, if you don't do that, it's going to lengthen the amount of time the horse has to be here, or you're going
because you don't know for sure what you're dealing with.
Exactly. So you're just you're going at it blind, but then you can't really pinpoint, down to the specifics, what kind of in-hand work is exactly what the horse needs.
So you're playing without the aid of the veterinarian. You're playing diagnostic darts and just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, hoping you're going to get it right.
Exactly. Because a lot of times, especially in the leg, you'll think that a horse is he's got something wrong with his ankle or maybe his hock, but then you have to move up a joint to really find out what the problem is.
Yes.
And I know you've experienced that, and it's real prevalent with what I do. So I've got there's two great veterinarians in my area here. The vet that is my personal vet, she is phenomenal with lameness. But she's one of those folks that if she doesn't know, she won't give you an answer. So
Gotcha.
So she's, we've had to move on to the next vet a time or two just to make absolute sure, for certain that what we were doing was correct. So that's just, part of what I go through.
Well, it sure sounds like a lot of fun, Carl. Well, and so actually now taking all of this, I want to backtrack for a moment if we can.
Absolutely.
So you were mentioning, I'm going to go back to the shoes and the pads.
Yes.
You were mentioning that there's federal regulation on the shoes and the pads. What's that about? Talk to me about that.
Well, the Horse Protection Act was written in 1970 by Senator Joseph Tidings. And what it did was it was meant to safeguard the Tennessee walking horse, spotted saddle horse, racking horse, those breeds of horse that wear the equipment that they do, that have been proven to use the abusive tactics to train the horses. So the United States Department of Agriculture was told that they needed to clean that up. So that was in 1970. Through the years, they progressed, and in the early to mid 80s, the Department of Agriculture handed part of the power back to the Tennessee walking horse industry, the racking horse industry, the spotted horse industry, and they all now have what is called an HIO, Horse Inspection Organization.
Okay.
And in any of those breeds of horse that goes to a horse show, if they compete, if they go through a public auction, or if they're done in any kind of public presentation, they have to go through a pre-show inspection of an approved horse industry organization that does the inspections.
Okay.
So every year, and they are spot checked by the USDA. The USDA still will show up at points and times and check in behind.
Kind of random inspections?
Well, they say random, but sometimes I think that the folks know that they're going to be there more times than not. We can get into that down the road in this conversation. But every year, the United States Department of Agriculture, they will have a training session. It's usually the end of January, 1st of February, and they give each one of those HIOs an operating plan for the year. Anything that has changed, any regulation, there's lots of things that have happened since the inception of this, because in the Tennessee walking horse world, every year, the first horse show is the end of March, which is the National Trainers Association. They put a show on the first of the year. So the United States Department of Agriculture will have their training session. They will do the operating plan for the year. They will present it to the HIOs, and then the HIOs will let the public people that train the horses, show the horses, know what the operating plan is. So you've got 3.5 or 4 weeks there to figure out how to get around the new regulation. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, so then the operating plan is the new regulations, but you're giving a time.
Well, you're not given that. They post what the new regulation is.
Okay.
But in the world that I come from, you just figure out how to get around, circumvent the law, where you can still have the horse the way he needs to be, but get through inspection, be compliant, if you would, for the inspection process.
Be compliant for inspection. So inspection is before each show, or is that just a once a year thing?
Before each class at the show, and then at all shows, the first place horse come back through inspection. At the larger show, the first 3 come back through inspection. And they do sometimes do some random drug checking, but not to the degree that I would, because there are some drugs that you can use that you have to test for specifically to be able to trace them. They also have a swabbing thing that they did called the gas chromatic stomographer, because for years and years and years, we would just get the horses what we call show ready, get them to the right amount of soreness, if you would, on their feet to where they would perform. And then you just find like something like lidocaine or something like that to deaden the horse's feet to go through inspection. And then, oh yeah, that's the world I grew up in.
And so then I'm not very often speechless in these podcasts, but so you're soaring the hell out of these things so that they're going around in this other way, and I kind of want to get back to that again in a minute too, but so you're soaring them so that they go around in a particular way, and then you're using this lidocaine because it wears off after
if you do it topically, you can practice at home and come up with the right mixture of lidocaine or mineral ice or any combination of stuff. and practice at home and see how long it takes each individual horse to get back to where they need to be for the performance.
Wow.
So
Well,
they
don't
did.
these horses read the breed brochure that says they're naturally gated?
Well, that's the biggest thing. They are naturally gated to a point, but the show ring horse that they're breeding this day and time is more of a pacer than he is a truly gated walking horse.
Because
And
of
if you
the way
look,
that they've been selecting for breeding?
well, yeah, because they want a horse that's built a little bit different for the show ring. My wife has a horse here that's built perfect for the show ring. In fact, she used him some in some local shows with flat shod classes, keg shoe classes, after we quit showing horses. There's absolutely no way that I would ride him outside of an arena setting because he's a sickle hocked. There's no way to strengthen him. And they breed for that. They want a sickle hocked, a longer barrel type horse. Those are the easier horses to get to respond to that type of training.
And this is why so many of them look like dysplastic German shepherds crawling around.
You're exactly right.
Wow.
So when we do expos, of course we didn't do it in Murfreesboro. I wish we had. A lot of times we take her horse and I talk about form to function with him. And
Okay.
does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I make the example that even though he's a great and has been a great show ring performer for her in the past, he is not a horse that we could trail ride in the North Georgia mountains simply because of the way he's built. There's no way we could strengthen him to where he could take care of his body up and down the terrain here where we live. We use him to ride here at home. And if we go somewhere where it's really, really, really flat with no undulating ground, she'll trail ride him on something like that. But there's no way that we would do it any other way.
Because particularly with the weight of a rider on, he's not
Exactly.
structurally stable enough to be able to do that.
Well, he's stable enough, but you just can't strengthen him to the point to where he could take a 8 or a 10-mile ride. That you just can't strengthen a leg that looks like that German Shepherd you were talking about.
Gotcha.
You can develop it a little bit, but it's a character flaw.
Gotcha. So because of a breeding for more extreme or more just more fashion, right? I mean, is that one of the questions I keep coming back to in my head, and I'm trying to find a way to ask it is, what the hell for? Like, to what end are we talking about? We're sewing them to make them lame so they look like they're carrying more, they look like they're doing this, but what for?
Well, here's the crazy thing about the whole thing. It's the easiest thing in the world to ride.
How do you mean?
Well, I could take just about anybody that could balance in the stirrups and hold on to the reins and buy them a horse this week, and in 2 weeks put them in the show arena with an earpiece in their ear and talk them through the class and get them a ribbon at the horse show, and all of a sudden they're an equestrian.
So all of this is for the immediate gratification and vanity of.
Exactly.
Gotcha. This is just so funny to me because there was actually a meme that circulated around on social media that we kind of joke about all the time now. Is this cartoon of, the beginning dressage rider saying to the advanced dressage rider, I can't wait until I'm good at this. And the advanced dressage rider says, that's what's funny. We're never any good at this.
That's exactly right.
Like just the idea that we're constantly learning and constantly growing and kind of the road goes on forever and the party never ends, sort of a deal. And what you're saying is I could get a $2 strip ribbon. Used to be 18 cents when I used to, as a kid, order them for the local horse shows, but I'm sure they're about $2 now. I could spend several thousands of dollars and have you talk in my ear and go win a $2 strip ribbon at a local horse show.
Yes, sir. I have seen people buy get fresh people in the Tennessee walking horse world midsummer, June, July, all of a sudden decide that they would love to have a Tennessee walking horse and buy one midsummer and actually go to the World Championship the end of August and win a class at the World Championship.
Gotcha. And I guess I want to clarify and be sure that I'm not saying that we're bashing competition riding. We're not bashing.
No, absolutely,
general,
absolutely
right?
not. I mean, there is within the Tennessee walking horse, spotted saddle horse, all of those horse worlds, there are groups that do humanely train and have these horses that perform. All of those are on a different type shoe. It's more of it's a flatter type shoe. Now they do have some weighted shoes, toe weight shoes, and all of that. The abuse and most that I'm talking about today has to do specifically with the padded big leg horse.
Gotcha. And now you also mentioned flat shod or keg shod, and that's just a standard normal shoe that a horse would wear. Is that correct?
Well, depending on the association with, like the mountain horse people, a lot of their horses don't even wear shoes to perform. I think they have a rule. It's been a while since I participated, and for the longest time, they don't wear shoes at all in the show ring. In the spotted horse world, which they're a gaited horse, they're a sister breed to the Tennessee walking horse. They have the sport horse discipline where all of those horses wear keg type shoes, a factory stamped keg shoe, but they have a performance division too, and some of their shoes can be pretty heavy, even though it's a flat shoe with no pads. Some of those shoes can be a 1/2 inch thick and 1.5 inches wide. That's a lot. That's a lot of steel.
Yeah, that's a lot of steel.
And in the Tennessee walking horse world, all of the different divisions are dictated by the size shoe they wear. If you're a padded performance horse, you wear the padded shoes. If you're a park pleasure horse, you wear a park pleasure shoe, which is a 1/2 inch thick and 1.5 inches wide. If you're a plantation pleasure horse, you wear a plantation pleasure shoe, and it's a 1/2 inch thick with a inch wide. Then you go down to the light shod and the country pleasure and the all day pleasure, and all of those have size requirements on the shoes. It's not necessarily a level of education for the horse.
That's actually, you segued perfectly into that. I'm thinking of dressage as we go into different divisions. Basically, we're going up in our level of development. What's required of these horses when they go in the show ring?
You're going to have to give me more specific what you want, what's required of them. As far as
what are the tasks? Like if we're going into it, it sounds to me like they're all doing the same thing, but wearing a different.
They pretty much are, except that they do have a versatility program. They don't have that many people that compete in it. The majority of the people are either in the performance, the padded type horses, or the flat shod type horses. They do 3 gaits. They do a flat walk, a run and walk, and a canter. In some instances, now the canter has disappeared in the show ring on a lot of respects because it's extremely hard to teach these horses that are incorrect to canter.
Not okay. Not that it's hard for that horse to canter if he's developed properly, but if he's incorrect, it's okay.
When you're traveling in false collection,
yeah,
and your energy is not derived from the hindquarters,
how
are you going to teach a horse to depart a canter?
Right, and if you're inverted and your hips and your hind legs are left behind you, you're not reaching underneath your center of mass.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So I know I did a lot of showing, a lot of competing when I was growing up, and we used to delineate. It was not dressage at that point, but we used to delineate in the open shows that it was a rail class or a pattern class. Now, my experience with gaited horses is limited, I will admit, as far as the competition arena goes. But from what I've seen, it's primarily rail class. Is that correct?
Primarily rail classes. They do have the other type classes, but on a much smaller scale.
Gotcha. Okay.
And let's clarify something else here. There is another gaited breed that wears the label gaited horse, which is the American saddlebred.
Yes. Okay.
and they don't, to my knowledge, they don't go through the same stuff that the Tennessee Walkers, the Rackers, the Spotted Saddles, and all of those do.
Same stuff. How do you mean?
Well, I mean, they do wear a shoe, but they don't wear a shoe to the degree that the Tennessee walking horse does. The only action device that they wear is a quarter boot, but that's for protection more than anything. And they have a much more eloquent way of traveling, because a trotting horse that likes his job is really easy to animate.
Gotcha. Now, what about the, if I'm remembering correctly, the 5 gaited saddlebreds?
Yes,
Is that
yes.
still a thing?
Oh yeah. They
Okay.
still have those classes at Louisville. So they do a walk, a trot, a canter, a slow gait, and a rack. And the slow gait and the rack is similar to what the other breeds do, but they have more of a tracking hindquarters. They're not looking for overstride. They're just looking for the difference in the footfall. Trot
Gotcha.
versus the horse having the 4 legs that travel on the same distance.
Gotcha.
4 beat.
Okay. Oh boy. Okay. I feel like I need diagrams and things like that.
Well, that's the thing, and it can get extremely complicated, and that's why
Yeah.
in the legislation that's been around all these years, and for the last 10 or 11 years, the PAST Act that's been trying to be passed, there is so much information that unless you know horses, and unless you have spent some time with these different breeds, it sounds like a foreign language, and there's no way to make anybody understand it without them having firsthand experience with it. And then you've got the groups on the sound side of things that are wanting to pass the legislation, and the groups on the other side that are wanting to keep the equipment the way it is. And all of these groups are going to Washington with their story. And how do the legislators, they can't figure out what's right and what's not right.
Oh, sure. If they're not horse people, it's all Greek to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, hell, I've been riding for a long time, and half of this is still Greek to me. I feel really inadequate about this. And I've ridden gaited horses quite a bit. I've ridden, with starting young horses under saddle and different things like that, and teaching so many clinics as I have. I would say I've ridden a few hundred gaited horses, and it's still, even after that, I still feel like what we're talking about, I only barely grasp. So there's quite a bit of education into that, but and I think I want to touch onto that after we kind of do another backtrack, if that's okay.
Okay.
So the stuff we're talking about, the lidocaine and the 6 chains and all this other stuff, you're saying this was part of what you did for a while?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. That's the world I grew up in. I was born and raised in a family that did that, and it was not foreign to me. That was how Dad made our living. That's how we paid.
And so it was life. It was just part of life, right?
It was part of life, and when you grow up in that world, the USDA inspectors are the enemy because they're trying to take our livelihood away from us. It wasn't until I was a grown adult with my own training facility, coming to some realizations, that I realized that something was just really, really wrong.
So take me into that. And I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, kind of you and I chatting. Take me into, like, okay, so you're growing up into this second generation in this. This is the way of life. This is the living that you're making. And now it's I would say the total opposite of that. Where did you just wake up one day and say, screw it, I'm just gonna make it all better? I mean, it sounds like there's gotta be some sort of thing that opens the eyes.
It started several years ago. I got very dissatisfied with the direction that the Tennessee walking horse was going. I'm sure most everybody that would be listening to us probably has seen the expose that was done 10 or 12 years ago with the trainer out in West Tennessee that was beating the horse with the axe handle, and the horse in the stall, that they were having to whip to get up because his feet were supposed to have been so sore. They actually had an undercover person that took those videos, and that guy went to federal court and was suspended for a certain amount of time from the Tennessee walking horse world, and he'll never show horses again. I think he participates as a spectator now. But I just got really dissatisfied with the way that things were going. I loved the horses, but I hated the job. And I really got to where I didn't like most of the people because the horses were a possession. They weren't something that they really sought out to spend time with and get to know more of. It was more or less show up today and tell me what I need to do to ride and meet me at the horse show, and show up today and practice and meet me at the horse show tomorrow, and I'll ride in my specified class. And that was it. They're not, some of them are horse people, but quite a few of them are not on the same level that of the people that you and I deal with. The people that you and I deal with, for the most part, keep a horse at home and are trying to learn to go through the training progression themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chasing infinity, trying to learn as much as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I got really, really, really dissatisfied with that. And of course, I had a farm and a new home, and everything that every bill that I paid, the money came from that world. So it was really hard to just find that point in time that you could make the change. And I had been through a real nasty divorce and just really down and out about that. And then I remarried Tammy. We've been married 12 years. And Tammy had never been around the horse world. I already knew there was a problem with what was going on because every year we got the USDA would give us the operating plan for the year, and it kept changing, and it never got any better, and the horses never got any better. The development of correct training never was initiated into it. We just, every year, somebody would come up with some great idea how to get through inspection with this new rule where we could all keep cheating as long as we were compliant at the horse show. And I hate that word because they will tell you they're 98.6% compliant with the government guidelines. But I'm gonna say this: a sore horse is easier to get through their inspection than a sound horse is.
Why is that?
Because the sound horse has got more natural ability, and he is one of those that will, when the inspectors do their job correctly, that horse will, what we used to call them, will tell on you quicker than a horse that can take a lot of soaring.
Oh.
That horse that takes a lot of soaring, he is so complete. And then you're dealing with the Tennessee walking horse, so you know how stoic they are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So anyway, I got to the point where I just hated my job, loved the horses. Tammy and I married, and she never had been around horses, so she jumped right in, was going to be my wife and go to the horse shows, and we were going to live happily ever after. And about the third horse show we came home from, she looked at me one day and said, "There's nothing right about what you're doing." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "What you're doing to these horses, if I'm going to have to live this way, we're going to have to talk." Well, I had already had a lot of conviction on me to make some changes, because I had already started a year or so prior to that following Dennis Reese around, learning natural horsemanship.
Okay.
And so I already knew that I needed to make a change. I just didn't know how. Was going through a divorce with when I was doing the Dennis Reese stuff.
Gotcha.
And then Tammy and I get married, and she has that conversation with me, and we keep going to horse shows, and I just get so completely dissatisfied. We get home, it was in April, we get home from a horse show on Saturday night, and she has this same conversation with me Sunday morning. And I didn't talk to her for the rest of the day, but the following day on Monday, I looked at her, I said, "So you want to go down this road?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, if I do this, we could lose everything."
Do this meaning change your operation altogether.
Change.
Leave that world.
Leave that world. I said, "We could lose everything." She said, "Okay." So we decided to make that change. We talked to the customers. Some of them were already dissatisfied because they could tell that my heart was not in it like it once was, because of the placings at the show were not the same that they had once been.
Gotcha.
I was just kind of going through the motions because I just
Yeah.
got to the point that I hated to do it.
Mhm.
So we decided to do that. And the following Saturday, we went from having about 25 paying customers in the barn to 2. We went from $20,000 a month receivables to 1,300 in one day. And
Whoa.
my wife will tell you that's the happiest day of her life, because when the last horse drove out the driveway, she went to the hardware store and got a bunch of big double ply garbage bags and any paraphernalia in that barn that had to do with training big lick sore Tennessee walking horses. She threw it in the garbage bags and hauled it to the dump and said, "Don't ever put it back in the barn. And I am with you no matter what."
Wow.
So
Wow. So that's a huge step, and certainly one that carried a tremendous amount of stress with it. Did you have a plan B yet at that point?
no, I thought, well, I've got the farm here. I've had 40 stalls under one roof, an indoor outdoor riding arena, and a cute little place. And I thought that business would, we'd advertise it, we'd do some boarding and some riding lessons and stuff like that until we figured out what to do. Well, I had that enigma of a big lick Tennessee walking horse trainer. I had no credibility outside of the world that I was accustomed to being in.
And now inside that world, you're mud.
Well, not at this point in time. It was not, my name did not become mud until a year later when I wrote the letter to Representative Whitfield. So we were out there in limbo for a little while. This was April of 2013. In December of that year, a friend of mine that had been a past president of the Tennessee Walking Horse Breeders Association had spoke out against the padded show horse and said that something needed to change. And he asked me if I would write a letter and kind of, back up his story. So Tammy and I just wrote a real elementary unofficial letter. And I admitted to everything that they had been told. I didn't point a finger at anybody else in the entire world. I said that I had done all that. I gave my trainer's license number, where I had been, what I had done. And I didn't give details, but I said, yes, I've sold horses, pressure shod horses, you name it, on that level. I've done it to compete. And at the bottom of that letter, I told all of the legislators, and if you would like to talk to me in detail, I put my phone number on that letter. And it made it to the social media within 12 hours.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that was the day that everybody that had been familiar to me in my life decided they hated my guts. I still to this day have family members that won't talk to me.
Wow. Because you spoke out about.
I've had death threats. I mean, I've had all kind of stuff. Tammy and I did not blow that out of proportion. When we decided to step out and make a difference for the horse, we decided to not make all of this stuff that we went through be about us. We wanted to make a change, and we wanted to show people that the change could be made and that the horse could come out on the other end. And if the horses did, if I did the best that I could do with the horses and put them first, that ultimately I would come out on the other end better too, which has happened. It's just taken a while, because the biggest thing that happened at that point in time between the horses leaving and me writing that letter is I realized I didn't know how to train a horse. I knew how to gimmick a horse, but I didn't know how to train a horse.
So you had to go from the horse being the object to now the horse is the objective.
Exactly. And that's the most humbling experience I've ever been through in my life.
Wow.
How forgiving they are, and how they will help you if you are truly transparent with them, how they will help you figure out what it takes to help them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an absolutely amazing story. And it's incredible to think of what you had to go through stress wise, finance wise.
Well, I did, and what happened to me is I lost myself in there because I had some identity before that, because I had enjoyed some success, not as much as others, but more than a lot. And I was recognized on a national level. I mean, people knew who I was, and I completely lost myself. And it kind of for a while there, I blamed Tammy for it. So Tammy and I went through
as you're processing through all of the things.
Exactly. I mean, we went through a little tumultuous time there where things weren't just exactly right. But Tammy, being the wise soul that she is, was able to bring me back from that and make me realize that there was life after all that for us, and for what I wanted to be, which is a horseman.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell you the numbers of days that I wanted so bad to learn this to train these animals. And Tammy would look at me and say, Carl, if you were driving a race car, your motor would be blown up. It's not his fault, Carl. Slow down.
Mm-hmm.
See, I had to learn all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had spent my entire life training from a reactionary standpoint rather than an understanding standpoint.
Yeah, gotcha. And now, were you feeling also in this time of transformation, the pressure again for that being the career, or how was that feeling, like finding the new Carl Bledsoe, right? The whole existential crisis. What kind of pressure were you feeling for that? And was that being reflected in the pressure that you felt like you were putting on yourself for the horses?
It was reflected in the pressure I was putting on the horses and the pressure I was putting on my wife too. And it was a double-edged sword there for me, because the pressure was always there. It took me another year and a half to truly realize within my heart that Tammy was not only my teammate, but the manager of my team. Mm-hmm. After I started listening to her, because she didn't care about the horses as far as competition. I had that ego, and everybody that does horses that's enjoyed some success, they get that ego. And I had to learn how to get rid of that ego. And I don't think that I could have ever done it had I been with anybody but Tammy, because she absolutely would not fuel my fire.
Gotcha. So she stayed that steady rock while you were.
Absolutely. Yeah. I looked at her the day all those horses left, and I said, what am I going to do now? She said, well, do what you know how to do. Gaited horses. And I chased around a little bit. Like I said, I had already chased Dennis Reese, and of course, I've got a real good friend in Kentucky that I traveled with, a gaited clinician, Gary Lane, and he deserves a whole lot of credit in my transformation, because he met me later in 2014 branch, and told me to come hang out with him some. And I took him up on his offer. He lives in Kentucky, and I went up there, and we were riding horses, and he looked at me and he said, for you to have grown up and spent your entire life doing what you're doing, you can really ride a horse. And it really, nobody had ever complimented me. He didn't have to compliment me at that point in time, but he put me through some drills, and I could do everything he asked me to do on one of his horses. So I traveled with him some, and Gary's, he's got some DVDs out, and he's written a book, and he's developed a lot of stuff for the gaited horse. But the entire time that I traveled with him, he said, Carl, I want you to be Carl Bledsoe, not Gary Lane. So it took me a while to develop, traveling with him, getting understanding that I had to find a different way to train the horse. It took me a while to develop what works and doesn't work for me in my way of doing things. And of course, here we are in late 2022, and I've over the last 3 years, I've done presentations at a couple of pretty well-known expos and done clinics all over the Eastern United States, and got a decent following of people. And all we, Tammy and I take our message forward. What's in it for the horse?
There you go.
And we're going to be correct, and the horse is not going to have to give up anything. And if you don't like what your horse is doing, then you've got to change you. And if I can do it, Patrick, if I can do it, anybody can.
Yeah.
Because there's not that many people that I run into that were as far down that other road as where I was at.
Right. Right. I mean, practically speaking, you had plenty of reason not to change, right? Because
Exactly.
it was making you your income. It was providing for your family. It was,
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It just wasn't right anymore in the perspective.
I'll never forget the day Tammy and I lost everything ultimately in 2013 prior to writing that letter to Representative Whitfield. And I remember the only thing we had left was my oldest horse training equipment, which I still have some of that, saddles and stuff like that. I had an old Ford F-150 pickup truck that was on its last leg, and the clothes that we owned. Everything else, the bank or the mortgage people or the finance company got it. So it was, I mean, we went through it.
Wow.
So best decision I ever made in my life. If you could offer every bit of that back to me today, just to train those horses, and I would not have it. With a clear title. You could offer it to me with a clear title. I wouldn't have it.
Wouldn't have it.
No, I love the life that I live now. I get to spend every day of my life letting these creatures that the Lord above gave us help me, and me try to help them and help people. And my best friend in the entire world spends every day with me.
I love it. I love it. I mean, talk about integrity, talk about, something you can look at and say, now there's nobody that can take that away from you.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And we don't negotiate on what we believe here. If you bring a horse to me, we evaluate the horse before we take the horse for training. And if the owner wants something that's not going to be good for the horse, or that the horse can't do in the amount of time that the owner gives us to do that, we tell the people that we just can't help them. I'm not the quick fix guy. And I could be that quick fix guy. There's a half a dozen local saddle clubs around here that have local classes for these type horses that have a little animation, and they want their head set and all this, that, and other. I could do that and probably do pretty good at it, but I'm not willing to compromise what Tammy and I agreed on because of what we initially gave up, but then what we gained by not compromising, because we've got a rock solid business now. We've got credibility outside of the Tennessee walking horse world and the other gaited worlds. I've got credibility in some circles in the quarter horse world, and I've got a level of credibility in the world that you're in, because people have noticed that I'm trying to do what's right, I'm trying to do what's correct, and I'm trying to make a difference. But ultimately, what I would like to have happen is if anybody else wanted to leave that, I would want to be that person to extend my hand and say, let me help you.
Yeah. Yeah. To be the gate, the person that opens the door, the person that opens the gate.
I don't want any credit for it.
Right.
I can just take my experience that I've been through, and I could help that next person not go through some of the stuff that I've gone through.
Yeah.
And it's not about me, Patrick. It's not. These horses have taken care of me. They put a roof over my head, clothes on my back, and food in my belly my entire life.
Yeah.
And it's a debt of gratitude that I have to pay back for all the stuff that I've done up till I made that decision.
Wow. Well, something tells me that Tammy's pretty happy Saturday night, and the conversations Sunday morning aren't the same as what they were when you were doing those
Yeah.
other shows.
We go out together. Of course, she helps me feed every morning, but Sundays we're not in a hurry we don't have anybody coming or any deadlines that have to be met on Sunday morning. And we're able to enjoy interaction with the horses and just have her and I conversations. And we'll do that. And then a lot of times one of the kids about 10:30, 11 o'clock will say, let's meet for breakfast. And we take advantage of, our kids are all grown, but they still like to hang out with us some. So we take advantage of that and go do that breakfast and, try to talk about the kids' lives and what they've got going on and all that kind of stuff. So
That's great.
It's just been I've been around the world to have not been very far. I've been around the world.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and the level of peace, I'm sure now,
Absolutely.
when you lay down at night and you're proud of what you did for that horse instead of ashamed.
You early on in life apprenticed or rode with Ray Hunt for a while.
Yes.
You ever read his poem, The Man in the Glass?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Dale Woodrow, I believe, is the original writer of that poem. Yes.
I have been that person that didn't see somebody looking back. I have looked in that mirror and not liked the person that I saw.
Yeah.
And when you don't like yourself, there's something wrong.
Something's broken somewhere.
Exactly. Yep. So, but moving forward, I started following classical type horse training, and I tell you, it has just completely consumed me.
So I'm fascinated about that and about where you were and where you now are. So you said that you had been for kind of a transitionary period following the work of Dennis Reese, right?
Well, I did that prior to 2014.
Okay.
And I liked Dennis's curriculum, and the natural horsemanship was a lot of fun.
Okay.
But you're not going to take what Dennis does and teach one of these horses to gait correctly.
What piqued your interest on that within the gaited horses in general? So you were still doing it the other way when you were interested in Dennis's program.
Exactly. The guy that shoes horses for me had been to Tennessee and been a farrier in Tennessee and moved back home here and was trying to build his farrier business. And he and I were having a conversation at the barn one day, and I said, I'm just really tired of all that I have to go through to take these dang horses to the horse show. And I said, but if I knew how to do something else, I would. He said, well, why don't you follow somebody? I am. And I said, what do you mean? And he showed me some of Dennis's stuff, and I signed up, and it's a lot of fun. And Dennis did open my eyes to a lot of things as far as the natural horsemanship and the partnership with the horses. But later on in life, to get to where I'm going to be able to teach and have credibility in the world teaching gaited horses, I had to be able to add to that just a little bit.
Sure. Would you say that was the planting of the seed?
Yeah, I would say that probably at that point in time was.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And so now you're following, kind of coming sort of back through that. You're following now more the classical dressage approach, correct?
More so. I have a hodgepodge of things. When I first get a new horse in, and then after they realize,
I lost you there for a second. When you first get a new horse in,
I do natural horsemanship stuff with them just to make friends with them and let them know that because most of them have been yanked and jerked and snatched and all that on, and there's a better approach.
Gotcha.
But,
Yep.
But
so you're taking the psychological approach to begin with.
Exactly. And it kind of gets the horse where he's interested in what you have to say a little bit.
Gotcha. Yep.
But But past that, to train these gaited horses to gait correctly, you have to be able to develop a top line, and you have to be able to pinpoint movement and get those horses to change weight, one leg, the other leg. They have to be able to move their barrel a little bit better. They're not a wide-based horse like a quarter horse, and a lot of your stock horses are. So the classical type training is just more conducive to them after you kind of get their mind made up that they like you. And it's, to me, the biggest thing about it for me is the training scale, and understanding the training scale makes me be accountable to me. Does that make sense?
You're talking about the dressage training scale?
Exactly.
Okay.
So you know, I never realized that there was a training scale until I got seriously.
Yeah.
So you know, I've got to following the training scale and got to, you know, learning about movement in lateral movement, and how you can pinpoint movement and get the horse to change his posture. And these horses have to change their posture, and they have to raise the thoracic sling to be able to do what we want them to do. And there was no training in anything gaited that I had done that had you kind of start here and you develop the horse here, and then the horse helps you develop as you go. Does that make sense to you?
So there was nothing really systematic.
None whatsoever.
Gotcha.
None whatsoever. You know, you got a colt in, and after he learned how to run up and down the hall, you started stacking shoes on him and chain, and then you manipulated his way of traveling with weight and shoe until he developed into what, you know, what they call the show horse. There was no regimen to be on to help that horse be able to manage himself physically and mentally together to where it made sense to him.
Gotcha.
So I started early on, after I discovered this, I started following you quite a bit, because you would share some tidbits of information, you know, about the horse's carriage, or you would say something about, golly, way back there, you said something about the thoracic sling. And, you know, I knew that the horses that was soft tissue that connected their body, but it never made sense to me that you had to teach the horse had to make a decision to use that thing correctly through training.
Gotcha.
Hell, we just use chains and chemicals and shoes to make that happen.
Wow.
So
and never really got it because you got the back dropping, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly. So have you ever seen any of those walking horse trainers, pictures of them where they're all humped over?
Oh yeah.
Riders. You know why that is, don't you?
No.
That's where the energy stops, is in the rider. It never comes through from the hindquarters because they're in false collection.
It's where the energy stops in the rider. Explain that a little bit deeper if you could.
Well, the horses are in false collection because they are not truly generating the energy from the hindquarters. They are taught to go fast and then manipulated with the shoe and the chain until that's why soaring works. It puts the horse back on his hocks, and there's no energy that comes all the way through the horse with the circle of eights. It stops right there at the rider. It's the craziest thing.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and of course, right, because the back is dropped and there's no way.
Exactly.
It's like the front end and the back end are living separate lives.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And so then that causes the rider to hunch, or the rider's hunching because of a defensive?
I think it causes the rider to hunch because over time I developed that hunch, and I try to be always have tried to be very correct in my seat, but it's derived from false collection because I could get on any other breed of horse and I would sit perfectly straight.
Interesting.
I could ride, you know, the quarter horses there at the farm, or I had some friends that you don't have that praying mantis look like all those gaited horse folks look.
Praying mantis look.
Yeah. So, over time, I figured that out. It comes from false collection in the horse. It shows up in the rider.
Well, and there always seems to be quite a bit of brace in the stirrup and brace in the rein.
Yes.
Which is going to give us a tight back, just by the way our own body functions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. So with what you're doing now, with where you're going now, with how things have changed, where are you headed? One of the recent things I've been saying a lot is this whole idea of chasing infinity, right? Somebody mentioned it at a clinic somewhere as like this theory of we're always trying to get better, but we're never really going to make it, this chasing infinity. What is it looking like for you, this chasing infinity, as far as the philosophy goes, as far as the idea of a program?
I would like to develop a training standard for the gaited breeds that is published, that anybody can follow. Now they're going to have to get some help along the way. But I would like to develop that. And first and foremost, I have a lot of dressage trainers that have called me and asked me questions because they have had gaited people started coming to them to develop the horse's top line correctly, to get the horse to gait correctly.
Mm-hmm. And gaited dressage is becoming a thing now, right? I know over the last few years, I've had several gaited riders, gaited horses and riders show up to clinics that are talking about gaited dressage.
Yes. Yes. So I'd like to help the trainers. The gaited horses don't have something that the horses that you train do. And it's kind of difficult for people to go through the levels with these horses from long and low to relative elevation. And I've only got one horse here that'll do absolute elevation, but I don't test, so we don't do that much. But our horses don't have suspension.
Sure.
They don't, and they never will have suspension. It will always be 4 independent steps.
Right.
So a lot of these guys and girls that are calling me with questions about their gait, and there's like, okay, so when I'm walking my horse and I transition to the gait, and I'm like, okay, you're transitioning to a faster speed of the walk. Okay.
Sure.
You're still doing 4 independent steps until you get to the signature gait of that breed. But on the lower levels of dressage testing, you're doing a free walk and an intermediate walk, and you're not even doing an engaged walk on a lot of those tests.
So it's a transition within the gait. It's not a transition to a separate gait.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so contact is not your friend with a gaited horse like it would be with a horse that goes from a walk to a trot. And a lot of those folks are having trouble with the contact. And I am working as hard as I can right now to come up with some explanation on that and some ways for people to troubleshoot that to help these people that have called me and asked me this question about this. And I'm just a short ways into it. I was really looking forward to coming to your place this weekend because I was going to bounce some ideas off of you, but that's going to happen if I have to find out where you're at and just haul a couple of my horses and come spend 3 or 4 days. That's going to happen.
That would be super fun. And for anybody listening who was not aware of it, Carl and Tammy were both scheduled to be here at our place this weekend in Natural Bridge, Virginia at Main Gate Equestrian, and the clinic didn't come together. And that was when we said, well, to hell with it. We were going to sit around and chat anyway, so let's make a podcast out of it.
Yep. So developing that walk, and you think when you go from a free walk, a lot of folks look at that contact and think that they need to really speed things up, and they don't. They need to have more energy, but not change the tempo. But there's an intermediate rein length in there that they need to ride with these horses, and they need to play with that intermediate rein length back to the long length, intermediate length back to the long length.
Okay.
And then I've got a couple of different ways that I set up ground poles and stuff like that to get the horse to start collecting himself from the hindquarters. These guys kind of have to start collecting themselves before you can put a lot of contact on the rein and start adding a lot of leg to them.
That sounds like the proper development of contact across the board.
Well, it is.
But I understand what you're saying in that it can be a little trickier.
I gave 2 lessons last week to some local people here, and the little girl said that she was a Grand Prix rider, and she couldn't get out of the horse's face, and the horse never would get his hindquarters under him because he was so over-faced with the reins and the bit that he stayed on the forehand the whole time.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
in these gaited horses, they will trick you because they are like a slinky. And
yes.
And if you don't develop your seat to stay in time with that hindquarters through that transition, and you're not with a coach on the ground helping you do that, that horse will default to a pace and be on the forehand, and you won't even know it because the feel of the ride does not change that much. It's just a very, very minute difference in the feel. Gotcha. And if you're not sitting there right with it, it's not like a neon sign. When you go from a good working walk to a trot.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. So the sensitivity that the rider needs, and going back to what you were talking about, how it's the difference in the length of stride specifically from the hind leg.
Yes.
That would take quite a bit of sophistication from the rider's seat.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So in the world that I live in, I'm everybody that brings a horse to me, I'm classically training that horse because it makes the most sense to the horse. It's a regimen that you get on, and it's friendly to the horse, but it's a partnership of understanding along with anything else. Most of these people have never had a formal lesson. Patrick, I trained world champion walking horses and never had a formal riding lesson until I got out of training Tennessee walking horses.
No kidding.
And I've taken a bunch of them since then.
Yeah. Well, what's that they say? The difference between an amateur and a professional is the number of lessons you take each year.
That's exactly right.
As the professional takes way more, or we would sure hope.
I never would have dreamed at 54 years old that I would study as hard as I study now. I thought, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's
so fascinating.
And it's just been the best. It's been just the best regimen for me to be on. And I will tell you why, because I've learned how to recognize so many minute things within my horses from one day to the next. The classical way of doing it, and what I like best about it is you present it in hand first. You're doing it correct. You present it in hand. The horse already has an understanding, and you have a visual. And after the horse the way it's been for me, after my horse kind of figures out what's going on, he's like, "Okay, Dad, this is the way it's supposed to feel right here." Yep. I messed it up 500 times, overdoing it. You follow what I'm saying?
Just 100%. Yes, absolutely.
Tammy's sitting there. She doesn't say anything. And then I'll get back to the barn and I'll get a text on my phone, and there'll be a little video and a caption says, "What was this?" So it's just the funniest thing.
We all need a supervisor.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But that's what the classical training has done for me. And I'm getting better at it. I'm not handy at it by any stretch of the imagination. I have to really work at it, but we all do at whatever level we're at. We all have to work at it. So
absolutely.
But what I have found, the more horses that I approach and the more horses I get to work, the easier it's beginning to be, because all of a sudden I can start at a certain place and have an expectation. And most times I can meet that expectation, not a great big expectation, but by the end of a work week, you can see a difference.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yes.
The only way I did that before was if I had the horse the right amount of wedge and I had his feet sore enough. Does that make sense? And then you got to pray that you get through inspection,
So the mechanical manipulation rather than the actual, mental and physiological development.
Exactly. And talking to me on the phone here, I'm a pretty nice guy to talk to. My wife will tell you that there have been days that she wanted to hit me in the mouth. And she's sitting over here on the other side of the computer laughing right now.
And nodding her head, I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yes, she is. So, but it was just, and we're writing the story. I've got all of the story about my childhood that I can share. I've got it written. But
that's awesome. One of the things that keeps popping up, it's popped up many times right now in the feed on this live broadcast here, is folks requesting your story written out as a book.
Well, we're working on that, but the transformation of me, I didn't realize that I was transforming the way that Tammy realized I was transforming. So she's got to help write. Because I didn't realize that I would get to points in life and look back over the last 6 months and think, wow, how did we get to this point here? But she lived through it and she realized what was going on. And Tammy had a pretty good barometer on me. So she could look at me during a work day and tell, I need to leave Carl alone today, or I need to be assertive with Carl, or I need to tell customers Carl is not in the frame of mind today for people to be around.
Sure.
And there's even been days that she's walked in the barn and said, look, you're not here today like you need to be. Let's just take the day off and go do something and not do the horses because they need a break.
Yeah.
Patrick, it's not about me, but that's the most fascinating part of the whole thing. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, would I be where I'm at now? I'd have told you, hell no. I just never would have even dreamed it. And I am humbled. That's what the horses have done for me, but it's been a combination of that. There's been people along the way that believed in me. Gary Lane did. Teresa Bippin with Foch, she believed in me. There's a lady in Buffalo, New York that grew up in the racehorse world. They have a Equine Collaborative International, and they do horse stuff there in Western New York, and they try to promote horses. And Barbara has really believed in me and been an inspiration to me because she's that person that she has impeccable timing. And there's been some points along the way where I've really been at the crossroads, and she's managed for whatever reason to be able to know that was happening and send me some kind of little inspirational quote or something like that that's kind of kept me keeping my chin up and looking forward. And I will tell you that the biggest thing that helped me with the horses, without me giving too much information, I don't remember the first time I rode a horse in my childhood. I have never had any fear to get on any horse whatsoever.
Okay.
And I never equated that the horses were scared of me.
Oh.
That never, ever occurred to me until I married a girl that grew up in a home, and her family was good, but her dad was kind of abrasive and abrupt and really, really driven. And she was scared to death of him. Absolutely would hide from him. And it finally occurred to her one day to try to help me understand that I was being her dad to the horses that I was training.
Gotcha. And there was just no recognition. It wasn't that you were doing it even in spite of it. It was that
I wasn't.
You didn't recognize that.
Recognize it whatsoever. So once I got a filter on that and started learning how to turn the volume of Carl down and listen to the horses, my world completely opened up. It
Gotcha.
completely opened up. And I've always been willing to stretch myself. I've gotten into some things that with people. Well, I'll give you the best example in the world. I was so humbled but scared at the same time to be the clinician at the Southern Equine Expo earlier this year. You could never imagine, because I'm going to be that clinician, and there's Patrick King, and there's Guy McLean, and there's Ken McNabb. And I looked at Tammy, I said, am I supposed to be there with them? And she looked at me and said, yeah, you certainly are. And what that's done for me, you guys have stretched me. Okay. And a person always has to be willing to be stretched.
Yes.
If you're not willing to be humiliated, then you will never grow. And I,
100%.
and I, that's been the thing to me. And I've always had her support behind me, but then I've had, I met Guy McLean a couple of years back at the Horse World Expo. And he made it a special point to come over to me and tell me he was intrigued with my presentation. He said, I've never heard anybody explain the mechanics of a horse, a gaited horse. He said, I've heard them talk about putting bits and head rigs and shoes on them. I've never heard anybody talk about how that horse's body works. You have intrigued me. And that was the first time that I felt like maybe I was, getting where I needed to be. But then I got to do a local gig here. The Georgia Horse Council did a horse fair, and they reached out to me. And there's a lady here south of Atlanta, Sandy Forrester. She does classical type training. Her place is called the Powder Forest. She studied with some people, and she's pretty well known in our world. And she was asked to do a presentation there, and Ed Dabney, I don't know if you know Ed, but he was presenting there. And once again, here I am with a group of people that have lots of credibility, that kind of have a following, and it really humbled me again. And that's the thing going forward that I hope that I'm always able to relay. It's never going to be about me. I have been given this gift to take this story.
I'm sorry, we lost you there. You've been given the gift to
take this story forward and to help the horses. And I'm still working behind the scenes. I'm still working on the legislation. The PAST Act got marked up about 4 or 5 weeks ago in committee.
Okay.
It might come to a vote before this year's over with.
Oh wow.
Wow. But the other side's fighting it really hard. But I truly hope that it was passed, or some semblance of it passes, just for the benefit of the horses. But it's not going to change my story, because there's an entire group of people out there that need to learn how to train these horses. Because I promise you, when I came from that world, I had no clue where to start.
Yeah,
I could put a bit on a horse and speed their legs up, but teaching that horse to engage and use his body and his mind together absolutely didn't occur to me.
Wow. So that's where, we hear people talk about the difference between somebody who's got 20 years experience versus somebody who's got 1 year of experience 20 times, right? And not progressed actually out of that.
Exactly. And you learn really, really quick when everything that you eat and wear and drive depends on your ability. I was 41, 42 years old when all that happened. High school education. I didn't have skills to do anything else.
Sure. Sure.
And I'm limited with technical stuff, with the computer and stuff like that. So it was a make it or break it kind of deal. Scylla, that's on the computer. It's not.
Right.
My dog's answering your dog.
That's goodness. Tilly, leave it. We've got a party going on.
Yeah, we do.
They have their own little podcast going.
That's funny. That is funny.
Oh man. It's so interesting to think about spending all of that time and not progressing, but I can also understand that, I might be the kind of person that if I were to go fishing, And if I were to decide I like to fish, I probably wouldn't be a better fisherman 5 years from now than I am right now, because I would have a different drive.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I to some degree, maybe we could say that many of those people aren't wrong if that's the only drive they, if that's only as far as they want to go with that education. But that, withstanding the abusive stuff, there's no excuse for that.
Well, there isn't, but it is so commonplace. I live in North Georgia. You can drive through the North Georgia mountains and there's chickens in everybody's yard, and I don't mean eating kind of chickens. The little roosters tied out in the backyards.
Gotcha.
You can't tell those folks that's been 10 generations of folks fighting chickens that it's wrong. You do what you know.
You do what you know.
You do what you know. And I'll be honest with you, I blame the biggest problem with the Tennessee walking horse is the breed registry does not own the World Grand Championship. It is owned by a private corporation called the Celebration Incorporated. And they have more influence over what happens with the rules and regulations than the breed registry does.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so there's been several times that there's been grassroots movements to vote in enough people at the breed registry to change some of the things, but the Celebration Incorporated had enough money and enough political pull for that to not happen. That's one thing in and of itself that makes it harder to change and get the rules that need to be in place done, because the Celebration Incorporated is a for-profit corporation. Does that make sense?
Yep.
They could privatize this thing in a hurry.
Yeah.
Up to a degree and change the landscape of it quite a bit. So I don't think it would ever happen, but they could.
Yeah.
The second thing that happens is there's no education in that world. You can go apprentice with another trainer, but there's not a standard that you have to meet to be. If I have a groom that works for me and I get put on suspension this week because I've got a sore horse, I can get some of my buddies to say he's a good trainer. You with me?
Yep. The buddies to say he's a good trainer, and then
they could get him licensed next week, even if he's only been a groom for me for 6 months.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So then technically you can be directing that operation. And
exactly.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. So and then in the judges thing, and I've held a judge's card in 3 different associations.
Okay.
They are taught to look for the action of the legs and never taught to watch the movement of the horse and the correctness of the horse. There's a lack of education in the biomechanics, the way that a horse's body is supposed to move. And Patrick, gaited horses are not that much different with their body than they have the T3 gene, which makes the recycling of their gaits, their footfall a little bit different.
Okay.
But they use their body basically the same.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I think it does.
There's no education system out there for the judges to look for a certain standard. I know in the intro levels in when you're testing dressage, there's a certain criteria that horse has to meet, not the person, but the horse has to be at this level before he can move on, because it's muscling, it's training,
right?
It's teaching the horse's mind so the horse is able to do his job and be fit doing it. They don't have that in the gaited world.
Gotcha.
So that's going forward. I'd like to come up with the standard that some of these groups would use. Of course, you've talked to me for the last hour and a half or so, and you realize that I say things just the way I think them. I'm not a writer and I don't articulate. So it's a long process for Tammy and myself to get all this stuff written and then in the order that it needs to be in.
Yeah.
Does
Well,
that
and
make
that can be really hard to do, but you're basically, I think you referred to it as the operating plan, right? That
Yes.
that gets sent out
Yes. Yes. So
it's like you're writing a whole new operating plan.
well, I am, but I don't have as much pull. I don't have as much. The USDA can tell those folks what they need to do. Somebody's going to have to be inspired by what I do to make it. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. Well, and it seems like for the most part, change that happens with people in whether it's disciplines within the horses or anything that we do in life, it's either inspiration or desperation that fuels the
Exactly.
change.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And you just hope to hit them with inspiration before they run into desperation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh, this is awesome, Carl. This has been so fascinating. I feel like I could talk your ear off. We could talk each other's ears off for quite a while. So I'm really looking forward to getting together with you for a few days whenever we can make that work. That's going to be so much fun.
So what Tammy's going to do is talk with Lisa, and we're going to come up with a date in the spring.
Perfect.
What I think what happened to us in the fall, there's a lot of people in your area that would ride with me, but they trail ride in the fall, and they make their plans a year in advance.
Yep. I totally get that.
And
Yep.
and that's I think that's what we ran into, because we had several people say if you do it in the spring, we would
Gotcha.
absolutely be there.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, and I hope that we have listeners here that are also interested in being riders or auditors. And I totally understand the idea about the trails here right now, because we are along the crest of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and
Right.
it is absolutely beautiful right now.
Yes,
You
it
know,
is.
so I totally understand that. But yeah, we will make it work somehow, come hell or high water.
And I've got some, I can't post it tonight, but I've got some, in about 3 weeks, I've got some real exciting news to share with you about some expos next year that I've been invited to.
Fantastic.
So,
Great.
So going forward, the ball is still rolling. So
okay, that's
so
fantastic.
We're really excited, but I'll share that with you when I can.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear about it. So Carl, first, I've got my wrap up questions here, because I know we could go on forever, and I've been guilty of not looking at the clock enough on some of these podcasts and gone for like 4 hours on a few of them, and I want to be respectful of time. Would there be anything else that you'd want to touch on specifically for folks at this point? Or maybe we'll do another podcast too. I look forward to doing that.
You know, I would like to just tell the folks to not give up on their horses if they're having trouble with them, especially the gaited horses. There is help out there, and it's not easy at first, and be very careful following some of the things that you see on the internet. There's a lot of folks on the internet that talk about what they do with their horses, and they're trained out of tension. You know, and be certain that if you're following somebody on the internet in your training curriculum, that it's somebody that has the same root beliefs that you do about the horse in general, and that they're not guiding you to do something that's going to get you and or the horse hurt or in trouble. So, of course, I'm sure you probably have the same advice for your folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever your principles are, right?
Yeah.
The principles have to align. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, and I'm never against, I mean, I tell my riders all the time, you ride and study as many people as you can, because the more people you hear, the better skill set you will have. But going forward, you've got to develop your feel for it, and you've got to stick to a regimen with the horse. I told the group last week, Atlanta couldn't take Buffalo's quarterback and put with their offense, and Buffalo couldn't take Atlanta's quarterback and put with their offense, and neither one of the offenses be productive, because everything is set up for the offense and the quarterback to work together. So if you're going to be the quarterback with your horse, then you need to be sure that the entire curriculum is conducive to what you're trying to teach him. Don't go to Carl Bledsoe today and Joe Schmo down the street next week and somebody else the next week and keep changing lanes with your horse.
Right. Right.
Find somebody you like, find something that's working for you, somebody that you can understand, and you and the horse stick with it to the two of you get to a point to where you're productive together. And then if you need to make a change, make the point then.
Mhm.
Don't keep changing thinking that the horse is going to change. You've
Right.
got to be steady, and you've got to stick to something for a little while before he's going to believe you and stick with you. So
I think that's really great advice. That's really great advice, because there's nothing harder when it comes to the psychology of learning than inconsistency.
yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So that's actually going to take me into my first wrap up question here. So perfect job making the segue right there. I love it. So what would you give as one actionable tip or thought for riders, something that they might be able to ponder on or work on today with their horse?
Setting the scenario up to where that horse can relax. We are so driven in our world, and most people that come to me, they work a job and the horses are their hobby. So when they get to the barn, they're uptight and they're trying to get a certain amount of work in a certain amount of time. And a lot of times the horses, after a little while, won't stay relaxed because they're anticipating, because the person is so driven to work. Less is more. It's okay to go to the barn some days and just hang out with your horse out there and not work and try to learn anything. And you and him just be pards.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Next question on here. What's a recent book that you've read or video that you've watched?
Oh, me.
Some of these are kind of random.
Well, I am going through the second time Eitan Beth Helmecki's Cowboy Dressage book.
Okay. Aton's book. Yeah.
So I've been fascinated with Eitan for a while.
Yeah.
You know, that's a discipline within a philosophy within itself, kind of like the Vaquero, the bridle horses,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
Cowboy Dressage, but it is fascinating. I think later on in life that Eitan may be one of those folks that's talked about, maybe like Ray Hunt. Might be.
Yeah.
Not sure yet, but you know, he's kept his finger on the pulse of that Cowboy Dressage to where it has stayed what he dreamed it to be, and they've not commercialized it to where anything looks forced with those horses.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I appreciate that, because
I missed the last part. You appreciate that because?
I appreciate it because I grew up in a world where everything was forced. So
okay. Yeah.
I hate to see that expression on a horse.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't stand it anymore. It doesn't have to look and be that way.
There you go. Yep.
So-
And I know that within Aton's program, when they have their competition, the softness and the partnership are scored above everything else, as far as I remember it. Mhm.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And that's what I try to preach with my people the most. You got to have the partnership first. If it's not a relationship, it's not going to work out. Now, videos, I have it's not been recently this week, but here recently, I have been back through the training videos on the course that I went through with you.
Oh, on the master classes. Okay.
So, yeah. So
That's fantastic.
I will, when you and I see one another, I will be ready for you to critique me.
There we go. I love it. I'm looking forward to that. I really can't wait to ride with you and share ideas in person, and with the horses there with us. I'm really excited about that opportunity. Yeah. Awesome. Great. So next one, and I think this has been the whole basis of our entire conversation. So I don't know if we can make this a small response, but what is something that the horse has given to you?
Humility.
That's as succinct as it could get.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So this is a constant journey of discovery and improvement. What area of your horsemanship or self-development are you working on currently or wanting to improve?
I'm improving my physique just a little bit to where I can be a better rider for my horse. And then I'm going to get, when I get my physique a little bit, I broke a leg this month, a year ago, and put on
Right.
20 or 25 pounds. And I've lost some of it. And I've been on that roller coaster up and down with the weight. And I'm getting myself fit. Then I'm going to get in a virtual lesson program, probably with Patrick King. Somebody, I'm going to get in a lesson program somewhere, back in a lesson program to get me more aware. You cannot be too aware of what you're doing.
Right.
So, and then like I said, I think in the first sentence or two when we started this thing, if you don't like what your horse is doing, the first change that's got to be made is you.
Yep.
100% of the time.
Yep.
So if I want to get, if I want him to get better, then I've got to get better.
There you go. That's awesome. And I love that you brought up that poem that Dale, I want to say Dale Woodrow, The Man in the Glass. For anybody that hasn't heard or read that poem, I've heard that so many times. I won't do it tonight because I'd probably mess it up, but on most days I could recite it the whole way through for you there because I've heard it so much, and it's a incredibly meaningful poem. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, that's awesome. Okay. So if you had a giant billboard advertisement for the whole world to see, the whole world, what would be the message that you'd put on it?
Oh, man, that's a big question. Our world to see. Tammy, you want to help me with that?
There we go. That's the right answer. That could be the billboard, couldn't it?
What? Yeah. Understanding empathy. You need to be empathetic and be able to, if you're working with an animal or another person, you need to be able to put yourself in their shoes and then say, am I being what I need to be in this situation to make it work?
There you go. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Carl, how can folks find you?
I am just Gait on Facebook, or Carl Bledsoe on Facebook. And Carl Bledsoe Horsemanship is my website.
Perfect. Perfect. Awesome. I'm going to wrap this up. Carl, hang in here with me and we will chat a bit after we end this. But gang, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in for episode number 55 of Talking About Horses. I really appreciate you giving Carl and I your ear for this time. Please remember that if you've missed any of this, you can access the full broadcast through Facebook, YouTube, from iTunes, or by streaming directly from my website by accessing the Talking About Horsemanship or Talking About Horses page from the education drop-down menu. And through whatever platform you're listening, please be sure to give us a rating, comment, review, and share with your friends. Tune in for the next one. And thanks so much, gang. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.